Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, every week of college football is wonderful in its own way, but holy pants, was this weekend of college football unbelievably fantastic. One of the two or three best I can ever remember.
It was pretty incredible, and I'm glad I have a two television set up so that I can keep both going, watching the Michigan Nebraska game, the Alabama Texas A&M game, which I didn't expect to have to watch that much of, but that was an incredible game as well. And all of these games coming down to the wire, preceded by I get home in time to watch Penn State and Iowa, the ending of that one, and all in all, a pretty good day. And so here we are. I did not watch any of the Notre Dame Virginia Tech game because
why would that matter? Neither of those teams have any relevance nationally, so why would you waste any time on that?
Exactly.
Just because it's a close game doesn't mean it's an important game.
That's maybe that should be a slogan somewhere. Like maybe if as Notre Dame is leaving their locker room, just post it above and they can just tap it all day long. Just because it's a close game doesn't mean it's an important game, and that can be their rallying cry. But yeah, here we are to talk about the weekend that was, and it was certainly one for the books, led off or capped, I guess you would. But most importantly, let's just start off with the Texas A&M win over Alabama, 41-38. Bama outgains Texas A&M. Texas A&M, Zach Calzada, their quarterback, gets hurt, gets knocked out of the game, but is only out of the game for an Alabama possession before he comes back in. Or he wasn't out long. He looked like he couldn't really walk, and then he went to the tent, and a miracle happened, and he come out, and he was good enough. But I think, Tom, I know where you're going to say this game was lost by Alabama, and I'm going to go there first. Alabama kicks 2 field goals inside the 10-yard line in that game, a 4th and 2 from the 4, and I think a 4th and 4 from the 8th, and they kicked 2 field goals there. They just gone for it and succeeded in one of those games, in one of those opportunities, they probably win. Alabama thinks they can do almost no wrong, but if we don't get many opportunities to second guess Nick Saban, so let's spend some time second guessing Nick Saban.
Yeah, I mean, mathematically, those were exceptionally not the right call there. From Saban's standpoint, and based on how the game was playing out, it was I get it. I understand what he's thinking there, which is Texas A&M is they have they've spent all of their fuel, and now they're just kind of coasting and desperately hoping to get to the finish line. And so you just, every time you can cut it closer, it didn't seem like Texas A&M was a threat to score against Alabama anymore. They had a great first half, and then the second half was just nothing. They basically didn't come out of the offense, basically didn't come out of the locker room after halftime. So I got those a little bit. It's the wrong call ultimately, but I at least get the thinking. I was more baffled by right before halftime. Texas A&M has had this huge lead. Alabama has scored. They sort of cut. You sort of had the here comes Bama. You could just kind of feel that here they come. They had the ball. They had all 3 timeouts left right before the half. It was go down the field. All you have to do is go down the field and just kick a field goal. We're going to be playing a prevent, so you can just kind of work your way down the field, just get into field goal territory, kick a field goal. And then, and then it's your guys are going into halftime going, all right, we got this. Their guys are going into halftime going, oh man, I hope we don't blow this. And then Saban just kind of kneels on the ball. It was that was not, you have big playmakers. You have a quarterback who you theoretically trust. Maybe he doesn't trust Bryce Young as much as you would expect, but that was an opportunity to put some points on the board that they just kind of no, it's good. And that to me was a weird decision as well. Yeah, a couple weird things for Nick Saban. You can't really question Nick Saban all that much, but there were some weird choices.
Alabama scored. They were down 24-10 at the half, 17-7 after the first quarter. Go on to outscore Texas A&M 28-17. But it was not enough. You had the Alabama blocked punt, which was answered as well as you will ever see by a kickoff return for a touchdown. Just totally negate. Mm-hmm. What's the the percentage like 90% or 95% of the games you block a punt and score on that, you win. Unless, Tom, the ensuing kickoff goes for a touchdown. I think maybe there's some cancellation there. But just looking at the Texas A&M was held in check pretty well. 379 yards of total offense, 94 yards rushing, 3.5 yards of carry. Alabama was held in check rushing as well, except Brian Robinson was able to do some things, but still they only averaged 4.5 yards per carry, nothing great. But I think a lot of that was because of Alabama was putting constant pressure on Bryce Young, sacking him quite a bit. And because I'm watching both games at the same time, I've got the sound lower on the Alabama game than the Michigan-Nebraska game. But you look over, and I don't know how many times they're coming from all different angles and taking Young down. And I'm not sure how many times he was sacked in that one. But let me see here, like four times. And he was probably, I saw him chased around twice as many times as that. And so they did a really good job. And yet Alabama still scores 31 points on offense. But it was bound to happen. Before the season, we pointed at this game. During the season, not so much.
Yeah, I mean, this was a game that like you said, before the season, it was like, man, this is going to be, you always kind of look at Alabama's schedule like, well, there are 3 losable games on here. And this is one of the ones you would have gone into the season saying, yeah, maybe. And then Texas A&M comes out and just looks like garbage for the first month of the season. I mean, their offense has been as terrible as just about any in the country. And, Nick, this is not the greatest Alabama defense in the history of Alabama defenses. I think there were some issues with linebacker play on Saturday, for example, that I thought were like, that's not typical of a Nick Saban team. But, this is like Rutgers. The Rutgers offense with it when Ohio State when Rutgers is going into play Ohio State, it was like, well, the Ohio State defense isn't perfect, but the Rutgers offense is not very good and has very consistently not been very good. And then it would just be like if Noah Vedral all of a sudden was just raining touchdowns on Ohio State. Like what? How did that happen? And that was Texas A&M. Like they have been. Texas A&M obviously is much more talented than Rutgers, just across the field. But their offense has been garbage. They scored 10 points at Colorado. Colorado might be one of the worst Power 5 teams in the nation, and Texas A&M put up 10 whopping points against them. They didn't look great against Kent State. They have been just very iffy all year. So yeah, this was one of the most shocking games I can remember. I mean, my son was like, "Why don't we watch the Alabama game?" I'm like, "No. We're going to watch Michigan, Nebraska. Alabama's going to kill them." And even at the end of the game, like last 5 minutes of the game, I'm like, "Alabama's going to pull this out. They always pull this out. They'll be fine." And then they didn't. It was shocking to see.
Just looking at the fourth quarter, the 2 field goal drives by Alabama, 48 yards, 64 yards. Then they had an 82-yard touchdown drive. Those were their only 3 scoring drives. They came all in a row in the fourth quarter. A&M was doing nothing in that second half until the fourth quarter. They had the 65-yard touchdown drive and then the 54-yard field goal drive to win it. And just I bet it was pretty awesome to be there. It was an interesting game to watch. And gosh, you just feel happy for Jimbo Fisher, who is just this guy, a pauper, basically just trying to make something out of this little bunch of rascals he has there in Texas A&M. And boy, if he can do something in Texas A&M, anybody can do something anywhere. But he said they were going to kick their butts, Alabama's butts, and Nick Saban's butt before the season at some donor meeting. He didn't quite use those words, but this wasn't a butt kicking, but it was a win, and it still counts. And I'm looking at the win probability, which I hate, when it was 38-31 in the fourth quarter. Alabama's win probability was up to 89.3, and then Alabama lost.
Yeah, the setup for that was that Jimbo said they were going to kick their butts at a donor thing, and then Nick Saban got asked about it. Nick Saban had not seen that before, or heard about that before, and so a reporter asked him on camera, and you can see there's a big smile on his face. The reporter says, "Is Jimbo says they're going to kick your butts," and he gets this kind of like vague look of surprise, and gives you a big smile and says, "In golf?" And the Texas A&M account before the game, I think, tweeted out like their game poster or whatever was a guy in the 12th man uniform trying to putt the ball into like a big scary looking elephant. And so yes, Alabama bogeyed that one. So that was a surprising big game. But it was, what was amazing to me was this wasn't like a fluke. This wasn't like Alabama was -5 in turnovers. It wasn't, yards per play were basically dead even, 6.44 for Alabama, 6.53 for Texas A&M. The EPA per play, expected points added per play was basically dead even, 0.11 for Alabama, 0.15 for Texas A&M. This was not like a fluke. Alabama just got beat. And, maybe this is sometimes you come out flat. Like sometimes you have a week when, your guys have just, Ole Miss was the week that everyone was talking about. And then they just annihilated Ole Miss. And maybe they got a little complacent. Maybe they got the old Nick Saban rat poison or something. But yeah, they just didn't do it. They just didn't do what you got to do. So that's it's a good reminder that can happen to anyone. But this is shaping up to be one of the more unpredictable college football seasons I think we've seen.
Yeah, and it may wake up Alabama, but it also tells the rest of the nation if Texas A&M can beat this team, then so can we. They're not infallible, they're not perfect, and now it puts Alabama in the position of they have to win out and beat Georgia to make the playoffs. And if they don't do either of those things, they're not going to make the playoffs, barring something crazy in this turning out to be unprecedented type of year. But that SEC championship game is going to look very interesting. What's actually going to happen, Tom, is that Kentucky will end up beating Georgia somehow, and then Alabama will just roll Kentucky in SEC championship game, and then Alabama and Georgia will both go to the playoffs, just as we said they would a week ago. But that was I don't want to say unexpected delight. It was a nice surprise. Let's just say that, what's a season without some upsets of a number one team by an unranked team? Tom, I haven't seen the polls yet. Where do you think Texas A&M is going to end up? I know the coaches poll is out yet. But
I'm sure it's going to be really stupid. I'm sure it's going to be like 17th or something, and I'm just going to fall out of my chair. Is that where are they in the coaches poll? Did you check? Are you checking right now?
I can't check. ESPN hasn't really updated it
okay,
yet.
I will.
Here we go. Take a guess, Tom.
While you're looking, I will say that there was a real delight in the fact that there was a field storming for a team that beat Alabama. On the same day, there was a field storming for a team that beat UConn. Like, man, college football is the best. All right, so I'm going to say they are number 17.
You are way off. They're 18. They are.
The stupidity is very predictable. It's exactly the same right level of stupidity.
They are significantly behind number 17 Florida, though. So I guess that's something.
Florida's quality loss is no longer looking quite so quality. You think that might?
Oh, wow! A coach has voted Iowa number 1. Is that James Franklin?
Tell Kirk hi for me.
So that's interesting. I wonder when the last time Iowa received a number 1 vote. Maybe 2002, 1985, somewhere in there. That's an interesting one. Tom, let's move to the next game if you're ready to do that. We don't need to spend too much time on this one. It's number 2 Georgia. We're just going to go through the rankings in order. Number 2 Georgia 34, number 18 Auburn 10. Again, Georgia, they rushed for 200 yards, but it took them 49 carries to do so. It's not an impressive offense. They ran the ball 49 times, threw it 21. The quarterback situation isn't great right now. I feel like, yes, Georgia's defense is really, really good. But if you have an offense that can handle a very good defense, a great defense, like I think Ohio State has a great offense.
Mm-hmm.
I think they can handle enough Georgia's defense, and Georgia's offense probably fits in pretty well with what Ohio State, can do on defense. So I almost feel like that's a favorable matchup for Ohio State, because I don't know how Georgia outscores you, and I think Ohio State has the weapons to to score enough on Georgia. But, 34-10 over Auburn, no big whoop. They were at arm's length the entire time. Anything on that one for you?
Auburn did have a 3-0 lead. So there were 4 teams going into the week that had not trailed at any point during the season. All 4 of them trailed at some point. That was Alabama, Georgia, BYU, and Michigan. Michigan and Georgia ended up coming back to win. Michigan a lot later than Georgia. Georgia trailed 3-0 and then just kind of sat on Auburn for the rest of the game, which is just kind of what they do. Yeah, EPA per play, Georgia plus 0.13, Auburn minus 0.14. Every time Auburn snapped the ball, they lost about 1/10 of a point. So that's that is not, strictly speaking, what you want.
No. Let's move to the other big game. The number 3 Iowa beating number 4 Penn State 23-20 in Iowa. I believe there was another field storming there.
Indeed. Yes.
This was so Iowa. Iowa's trying to hide their offense for the better part of the second half in that one. They are, rather than trying to get first downs to burn the clock out there, they just have Spencer Petras just run to the right and go down. Whatever you do, don't try to keep the ball on offense any longer than we need to. And there was one play where it turns out perfect for Iowa, but Penn State is backed up in their own territory. They fail on a 3rd down, but there's hands to the face or something, and or a holding, whatever. And Kirk Ferentz, rather than declining the penalty and getting the ball via a punt, he accepts the penalty. So Penn State is faced with a 3rd and 24, moves them back another 10 yards. And then, of course, they fail. And so they get the ball closer than they would have. But to me, this is a crazy decision to give Penn State another opportunity for a first down in a game that is tight as all can be. But because he knows, what? They lost Sean Clifford. Penn State did. We'll get into that. But he had no concern that Penn State's offense was going to pick up 24 yards or whatever it was, and that also his offense needed as many yards as possible that could come from a field position battle in there. And it was, I didn't understand it. I didn't agree with it. But then you see how it plays out. And Kirk Ferentz is like, look, when it comes to punting, just trust me. And so here I am learning to trust Kirk Ferentz.
Well, and what does that say more to you? How much he trusts his defense or how much he doesn't trust his offense? Because I think there's probably a little bit of both baked into that decision. But, this is an Iowa team that's going to be, when the polls come out, I assume they're going to be number 2 Iowa. Mm-hmm. And, I got to tell you, I don't really see it. This looked like 2 teams that were good teams, relatively solid teams, reasonably well coached teams with decent talent, and they're going to be good teams. But these look like, both of them look like teams that are kind of like New Year's 6 level bowl teams, but not playoff level teams. And it's just, Iowa just doesn't have the talent. You can just tell Iowa doesn't have the talent. They are very good at the one thing that they do. They can win the game the one way they can win the game. And if they can play the game that way, they can potentially win the game that way. If they get out of that, they are in big trouble. And, you saw it with Sean Clifford. Sean Clifford leaves the game and they were up, 17-3 or something like that. And then Sean Clifford goes down, and, the one kind of unsaid thing about this game is the role that Kentucky quarterback Will Levis played in this game by not being backup Penn State quarterback Will Levis. He was the backup last year. If Will Levis is still there, Penn State probably wins this game by 17 points. Will Levis is playing for Kentucky right now. Kentucky did just fine on Saturday. Taquan Roberson, 7 for 21, 34 yards, no touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 1 sack. His EPA, his expected points added for Penn State on the day, minus 19. I know you're not necessarily all, real advanced stat gurus. If you are minus 19 for a game, that means you were essentially taking away 3 touchdowns off of your team's expected score based on where you're getting the ball, on the field and how much time's left and all that kind of stuff. So that ain't good. And it wasn't like Sean Clifford was incredible beforehand. Sean Clifford, you was 17-3 and you're like, oh, wow, Sean Clifford must be, and the game swung so much after Sean Clifford left. It was 15-25, 146 yards, no touchdown, 2 picks. That was nothing great. He was negative EPA too. I mean, he was negative 3.57. I mean, just that's really not impressive. But Iowa is not built to come back unless they have the world's most predictable offense on the other side of the ball. And like, it was very apparent Penn State was not going to be able to throw the ball as soon as Clifford went down. So then you're super one-dimensional, and Iowa can just go, well, we're just going to punt, play field position. I was listening to the Iowa radio broadcast on the way home from the Ohio State game, and it just felt so inevitable that like you could just see Penn State just hanging on for dear life. And, they're hanging on to the tree root on the edge of the cliff, and it just keeps giving a little more every time. And Iowa's just playing conservative. They're punting at times when they probably shouldn't have punted. And it was just like, you could just see Kirk Ferentz going, no, I got this. I got this. Just trust me. I can see them falling apart. Just sit back and wait. Iowa's going to got at some point. Now, it's probably not going to happen in the regular season, but either in the Big Ten championship game, or if they somehow go undefeated, like this Iowa's team is going to be just a streak of blood on the pavement when they play, a college football playoff type team, because go back to the Rose Bowl they played against Stanford a few years ago, where it was like all season long they were just kind of doing this, and it was like, oh, look at this, what a wonderful disciplined team. And then they played Christian McCaffrey Stanford, and it was like 21-0, like 7 minutes into the Rose Bowl. It was like, well, that was fun. You feel like that's probably happening to Iowa at some point, but it's not going to happen to Iowa for a while. So they may be number 2 Iowa, number 3 Iowa, on those, in those top 4 in the college football playoff ranking show for a good chunk of the season before they have to play Penn State again, or have to play Ohio State or someone like that in Indianapolis.
Maybe there's some way that Adrian Martinez in Nebraska won't turn the ball over against them in the season finale. I don't know how.
We're gonna get to Nebraska in a minute, but Nebraska's going to get someone this year, and I think Iowa that game's in Lincoln. I think that's a possibility. Keep an eye on that one.
Friday after Thanksgiving, when Taquan Roberson came in, Penn State managed just 50 yards of total offense on their final 46 plays. When he came in, it was just that's like 1.0 something per play. Not good at all. Just looking at the scoring drives for Iowa in this game, and then we'll move to the next one. The first scoring drive, 4 plays, -8 yards, and it in a field goal. Then you have 11 plays, 75 yards. That's a touchdown. Good for them. And then it's 10 plays, 45 yards. It's a field goal. 6 plays, 32 yards. It's a field goal. 1 play, 44 yards. It's a touchdown. And coming into this game, I think over half of their touchdowns have come from turnovers. Like when they turn over, they turn it into points. And they intercepted 4 passes in this one again. And if you just wouldn't give them the ball, but apparently like the teams they have played at this point, they're helpless when it comes to that, because that's what they do. And you put an inexperienced quarterback in there and he's going to turn it over. But as you said, even Sean Clifford had 2 interceptions in this. But you got something else on this one?
Yeah, well, I mean, you mentioned the turnovers for Iowa and how it doesn't seem sustainable. Bill Connolly from ESPN tweeted something out that based on national averages for fumble recovery rates and the ratio of INTs to pass breakups, Iowa's turnover margin should be plus 6.4 right now. It's plus 15, and that's one of those things where it's like, oh, you can if you want to chalk that up to like, oh no, we're just really good at this. This team is just has the magical football magnet hands this year, and like that's fine. You can do that, and sometimes that luck will hold up over the course of a year. But generally, if you're a team that's living and dying off of that, there is going to be a week when it doesn't happen, and then you're in trouble. And it held up again against Penn State. They were +4 in turnovers, +3. They got 4, turned it over once. You're not going to be +3 in turnovers every week. If you play a team that takes care of the football and the team that can put some points on the board, you're going to have to push your offense to do more than they're comfortable doing, and that's when you start turning the ball over.
Yeah, and for Buckeye fans, continue to root for Iowa the rest of the way out. The best thing for the Buckeyes is to face a number 2 Iowa in the Big Ten championship game, where the entire story just becomes a college football playoff berth is on the line. And that way, if Ohio State wins, then it's harder to change that narrative as well. So that was an interesting one. And yes, Iowa is definitely not the number 2 team in the nation. They had like 300 and some yards of total offense, and they are there by default. And I've seen voters even saying like, what am I supposed to do? At this point,
they do require you to put someone in that number 2 list. And it's like, I could make an argument for any of 4 or 5 different teams being number 2 right now, depending on if you want to go by resume or who looks like they might be the best team right now. Or, I mean, it's Georgia 1. And after that, it's kind of like, yeah, I mean, you could put any of 4 or 5 teams there and I wouldn't really argue with you.
Let's, what about Oklahoma? Number 6, Oklahoma beats number 21, Texas, 55-48. Texas led this one 28-7 after a quarter. They led it 38-20 at halftime. But then Oklahoma benches Spencer Rattler, bring in Caleb Williams, and he looks like the next guy at Oklahoma. And while the story is that Texas completely collapsed, scored 10 points in the second half, I think what we're going to be talking about maybe later on is, where is Spencer Rattler going to play next year? Because it's not going to be Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. This is a guy who I don't think will do that, won't take that backup role. And so he's probably going to be a pretty hot commodity on the free agent market, but also it doesn't mean he's guaranteed to start wherever he goes based on what we've seen from him this year.
Well, he's got a little Shea Patterson to him, where it's like, I think a lot of the, he came in as this incredibly highly hyped quarterback going into a system where it was like, oh yeah, this guy's going to be amazing. And then it's just kind of like, meh. I mean, think about how bad you have to be a highly hyped quarterback playing for Lincoln Riley for multiple years and still be just kind of like, meh, that ain't good. And he has never come across as a particularly likable individual to me. You go back to that QB1 show and he's kind of berating teammates. It's just kind of like, yeah, I mean, I don't know that it's devastating to anyone in that locker room that he's not going to be the starter anymore. Oklahoma first of all, that game, yards per play, yards from scrimmage, 8.17 for Oklahoma, 8.46 for Texas. I did not get to watch this game live, so I went back and kind of caught up on one of the condensed games. And it's just every time someone scores a touchdown, it's just the quarterback leaning back as far as he possibly can, like with a slingshot, and just like vaulting it down, just launching it down the field. The balls on, I don't know, 4 or 5 touchdowns had to be in the air for like 60 yards at least on a bunch of those. One of those was the one from Caleb Williams. Like, holy Moses. There was a play where he hit a receiver right kind of at the pylon in the front corner of the end zone. It was one of the best throws you're going to see. And it was like an off-platform throw. He's kind of jumping, just looks effortless and just launches it. And that was, you're watching him and just going, like, all year long, Oklahoma losing a game has felt super inevitable because Rattler just was like very clearly did not have it and was not going to get them through the schedule. And they keep just kind of squeaking these games out. Now that if it's going to be Caleb Williams, and it sure seems like it needs to be Caleb Williams at this point, I don't know if they're going to get got now. Like I had Oklahoma losing as very, very likely. Now it's like, maybe not.
Yeah, you look at the schedule and they have TCU at Kansas, Texas Tech at Baylor, Iowa State at Oklahoma State. We'll see. Did you see former Michigan wide receiver commit Xavier Worthy for Texas catch 9 passes for 261 yards and 2 touchdowns? You wonder if Michigan could use him this year, but that's neither here nor there, unless we want to spend some time on it. But no.
Well, I had forgotten he was a Michigan guy, and you look at him. He was like the first play from scrimmage in the game. Mm-hmm. Just catches this little wide receiver screen. Just had the one guy. He was like a stacked wide receiver formation, 2 receivers out there. The guy in front of him blocks one guy. He makes one guy miss and just like turns on the jets. It's like, when was the last time Michigan had a guy like that? It has been a long time since they had a wide receiver who was like, that guy looks like the fastest guy on the field, no matter which field he's on. Yeah, I would say that might be something that's missing from this year's Michigan team.
Yeah, and before we can actually move on and talk about Michigan, Nebraska. We talked about Ohio State, Maryland, in our post-game instant reaction show. You can go find that. Let's wrap up with Michigan, Nebraska, I guess here, wrap up-ish. We don't need to spend, we'll talk about Michigan in tomorrow's Michigan Monday. But to see this happen for Nebraska, where they were getting pushed around for a bunch of the game, and then they get like two quick touchdowns. The game changes in the span of 2 minutes. They have all of the momentum. Crowd is going crazy. You're thinking this might happen, and then I think Michigan marches down 10 plays, 75 yards, and takes the lead back, and then it's a little bit more back and forth. But Nebraska just cannot get out of its own way. They have the ball. They're either leading or heading for the winning score, whatever. Adrian Martinez fumbles, and no, he fumbles it on like a 3rd and 1, fighting for extra yards, fumbles, and it's just like, well, of course. This is the same story every single week. Like, can you change something up? Can we choose our own adventure? Why do you just keep going back to the well of this Nebraska keeps tripping over their own feet trope? It's a bit tiresome, I'm sure. And we're just, we're not Nebraska people, and we're tired of it. Just imagine how Scott Frost and everybody there in Lincoln feels.
Yeah, I mean, I felt awful for Nebraska fans watching that game. It was just like, that is, I have said on many occasions, that is absolutely my favorite place to go in the Big Ten. I love going to Nebraska. I love everything about that program. I love the history. I love the fans. It's a great stadium. It's a great city. It's like everything is great. I love Nebraska. I always kind of root for Nebraska. It's just like, they're so close. Like this is not the helpless, crappy Nebraska teams that, in previous years, Ohio State goes in there and it's 56-0 in the third quarter. Like, this is a pretty good Nebraska team. They have been close in all of their games. All their games, they're 3-4 right now. And it's like they could very easily be 6-1 or even 7-0. Like that, without, you change 2 plays in each of those games and they're 7-0 or 6-1. They're so close. And this is extremely easy to say without any true emotional investment in Nebraska football. You got to give Scott Frost another year. Like, I recognize that it's not showing up on the scoreboard every week or in the standings. It's showing up in the scoreboard, but not in the standings yet right now. They are so much better than they have been in the past. Like, you have to give him another year. I mean, unless you're going to have a back channel conversation with Matt Campbell, and Matt Campbell says, yes, absolutely, I will come right now. You got to give him another year. And you feel terrible. And it's like, you feel so bad for Adrian Martinez, who is, he reminds me, and it's not just the last name. He just reminds me of Taylor Martinez, who was just like this quarterback who was pretty athletic, would make some plays, and would also make plays that you just went like, why would you do that? What are you doing? And just kind of had a way to find the banana peel in the big moments. Like, that's kind of Adrian Martinez to me. It's really like heartwarming to me to watch Nebraska running the option. It's not exactly the old school option, but I love watching Nebraska running the triple option. And it's like, they're sort of found something. That was something they did against Ohio State 2 years ago, I think, when Ohio State was up by a bunch, and then Nebraska had like one drive where they ran the triple option and went right down the field and scored a touchdown. I was like, oh, this is fun watching Nebraska do this again. It feels like that could be an identity. They're like most of the way there. They're going to have to win one to then believe and not have the, oh, here we go again. Cause you can sort of feel the, oh, here we go again with them at times. But they're going to get someone this year. They're going to get someone. I don't know if it's Ohio State. Ohio State might not have too much talent, because I don't think Nebraska is going to be able to keep up with an offense that's going to score a lot of points. I don't think Nebraska is winning a 45-42 kind of shootout. You know who doesn't have a great offense? Iowa. Yeah, you tell me that you have no, what how shocked would you be if Nebraska 23, Iowa 20 on the day after Thanksgiving, 24-20, something like that?
Not shocked at all. In fact, I can see Wisconsin or Nebraska finishing with the win at Wisconsin and then beating Iowa. That would be a pretty strong finish in the Big Ten West for a Nebraska program that has struggled, and that would give them some momentum. And that would come after the Ohio State game, then a bye week, then they go to Wisconsin, then they finish up against Iowa. But just, they have to learn how to stop losing, and then they can learn to maybe start winning. And it's the stopping the losing part that because, they had this and then they gave it away and they've done that. And I think I heard Nebraska is 5-16 or 6-15 in one score games under Scott Frost. And I've always attributed that to bad coaching. So I can't go away from that now. It fluctuates from year to year, but that's a bad number. And it needs to get better.
That is a bad number. And that tends to be something that evens out over time. Like one score games, there's just enough luck involved there that it tends to even out. Not everyone is exactly 500 in one score games, but if you're 9-1 in one score games, odds are that, you're not going to continue to win those at a 90% clip. You just feel like Nebraska is just so close. They are so close, but now they got 4 losses. So Ohio State, Wisconsin, Iowa, they're going to have to beat one of those teams just to go 6-6 at this point. Like that's, you go back to that Illinois game week 1. If they win that game against Illinois week 1, I feel like the conversation around this team is totally different this season. And, they nearly got Oklahoma. I mean, they took Michigan State to overtime. Like these are good teams, not Illinois, but these are good teams. Michigan's a good team. Michigan State's a good team. Oklahoma's a good team. They've been competitive. They've had leads against most of them late. I mean, it's just, they're so close right now. And it's just like, you just got to get over the hump and it will eventually happen. I was really rooting for it to happen last night. Cause it was like, man, when they scored to take the lead both times in that second half, they hit a 22-19 lead and a 29-26 lead. That place was going bananas. Like I have never seen that place. We've been there. At least I've been there twice. You may have been there more than that, but I've been there twice. And it's like, it's loud at the beginning. And then Ohio State just immediately just steps on their neck. And then the game's over. And then it's just kind of like quiet, friendly people. I would love to see a game where it's like rowdy in there, like a night game in there that's rowdy like that. That would be a lot of fun. It was like I was just so ready to watch Nebraska fans storm the field and have that like really cathartic release. And it's just like, nope. Guess what? Lucy pulled the football yet again.
You just see Scott Frost with his hand on his face, and same with the crowd. And unfortunate ending for Nebraska. Let's move to Michigan State real quick. And yes, Kentucky beat LSU. They're still undefeated, and they'll probably be in the top 10 here shortly. And Wake Forest got away with one at Syracuse, and they won in overtime, so they're still undefeated as well. BYU is out. They lose to Boise State. Michigan State wins at Rutgers 31-13. And Tom, we are just essentially like one game away from having a 7-0 Michigan State and a 7-0 Michigan. If Michigan State can win at Indiana next week, Michigan is off next week, but then they host Northwestern. That'll be a win. Then after that Indiana game for Michigan State, they're off. So if Michigan State can win at Indiana next week, you're looking at a 7-0 top 10 Michigan State hosting a 7-0 Michigan. I don't know when the last time these two teams were top 10, but I'm hoping that we see Michigan State win next week, and that way we know we're going to get it, because that is going to be an insane environment for East Lansing. A huge game for the rivalry. My third favorite rivalry in college football, maybe my second now, that Michigan Notre Dame is kind of like, this is always a fun one. And I know I'm already looking ahead to it, but just hoping I'll be rooting for Michigan State this week.
Yeah, and when you start looking ahead for Michigan State, that's when nothing bad ever happens. So they're definitely going to beat a shaky Indiana team. That I can assure you. Yeah, for sure. That's we've talked about, I think, off the air about the fact that the next 2 weeks are just kind of like okay schedule wise. October 30th, just in the Big Ten, you've got that game, Michigan State, and you got Ohio State, Penn State. Like that is going to be the whole Big Ten East race changes that day one way or another. Michigan State, man, I did not see this one coming at all. But Kenneth Walker III, 29 carries, 234 yards. Like when you have a running back like descend from heaven like that, and or in this case, heaven is Wake Forest. That can really change some things for a team like Michigan State. And I am super, super impressed with Mel Tucker and the job he's done.
It's really impressive because I I think I had him ranked maybe 6th or 7th in my Big Ten East coaches because where's the track record? And boy, he's putting it together. And it's hard not to believe that they are legit. And I don't think they're a top 10 team, but they are very much on the right track and very much better than they have been in a few years. Things are going in the right direction. I don't think that's smoke and mirrors. I think if you put them in the playoffs, bad things would happen, but they would also have to beat some pretty good teams to get to the playoffs. So if that happens, then by all means, go enjoy it. But what they're doing is it's surprising. They were picked, I know, but by some to be last in the Big Ten East. They're going to be doing much better than that. So credit to Tucker, the players for buying in. Just a really interesting culture revamp going on there.
Well, and that's a team that I think when we ranked Ohio State's most challenging games this year, I think that was like behind the non-conference games, that like the Akron game, that was one of the lowest Big Ten games in terms of challenge that presented to Ohio State. That's now, I don't think they're going to beat Ohio State, but to me, they're like Iowa. They're like a slightly different shade of Iowa, where their defense isn't quite as good as Iowa's, but their offense is a little better. Their offense is like has a thing it's really good at. Iowa's offense is just kind of like, well, the thing Iowa's offense is good at is if the defense gives us the ball with a short field, sometimes we score points with it. Like Michigan State has a thing they're really good at, and that is they're kind of going back to the D'Antonio recipe a little bit, which is run the ball, play good defense. They were their expected points average per play. They were plus 0.23 against Rutgers. Rutgers was minus 0.17. So more or less every snap, Michigan State gained like nearly half a point. That's that's pretty good. That is dominating a game. They were 9 yards per play, gave up 5 yards per play. If you were plus 4 yards per play, you are kicking someone's butt. Rutgers had 92 plays. Like their overall numbers look like halfway decent. They ended up with 382 yards, 92 plays. That is ridiculous. But Michigan State has a thing they can do. They have a way they can beat you. They're not necessarily going to beat everyone, but they have a way they can beat you. That's going to get them to 9-3, maybe 10-2 this year. I mean, that's remarkable for year 2 for him.
And quarterback Peyton Thorne is playing well. Also, has thrown for 667 yards in the last 2 games and hasn't really had a bad game yet. He's got 14 touchdowns, 2 interceptions on the season. So they're getting the most out of a lot of guys. And, Peyton Thorne being a sophomore, he could be around for a little bit longer. And Michigan State just looks like they're on the right track here. Anything else from this week before we get out of here, Tom?
Do we need to talk UConn-UMass? No? Okay. So UConn-UMass is a like normie weird game. Can we talk about the fact that UTEP is 5-1? Did you have any idea UTEP was 5-1? I mean, they're not playing a murderer's row schedule or anything, but UTEP being 5-1, that's one of the hardest jobs in all of FBS. Dana Dimmel's there, former Wyoming head coach, former K-State assistant. Like
Upper Arlington native, I believe.
Is he Dana Dimmel?
I think that was the story when he came back to coach against Ohio State as Wyoming's head coach after Joe Tiller left.
Oh, interesting. No, I did not realize that. Yeah, he's making some stuff work down there. And 5-1, and are they going to go 10-1, 10-2? Like probably not. But if you win 7 games at UTEP, like you have really done something. So that's just worth like you don't have to think about UTEP again. I'm just going to put that in your brain. Like, hey, if someone goes, hey, how about UTEP? You don't have to go, wow, they're bad this year, right? Like, no, they're actually like surprisingly pretty decent. I don't think it's sustainable, but they're surprisingly pretty decent.
How'd your Blue Hose do?
You know what? I didn't look. This is what happens when I'm working all day. I'll have to look up.
Hurry, Tom. Hurry. How did the Presbyterian football non-punting offense team do against, let's say, I don't even know who they would be playing. Mary St. Catherine.
Mary St. Catherine. Let's see. They lost 38-30 to Morehead State. So that's 38-30 though. That's that's a competitive game. So they were down 17-0 in the first quarter and came back, which is a thing you can do if you don't punt.
But also they were probably down 17-0 because they weren't punting. Let's be honest.
You shut your mouth.
All right, that'll do it. Thank you all for tuning in. Gosh, we've got a bunch of shows planned for this week. Even though it is a bye week, I don't know how we're going to fill those shows, but Tom, I got a feeling that we'll manage, right?
That's generally not an issue for us.
No, it isn't. So thank you all for tuning in. As always, check out BuckeyeScoop.com. Feel free to become a member. Thank you if you already have. Also, you can find all of our stuff at youtube.com/BuckeyeScoop in terms of videos, live streams, interview sessions, highlights. Mark Givler is on the road in Florida this past weekend, looking at some top prospects like the 2023 five-star AJ Harris. Got an interview with him as well. One of the Buckeyes' priority targets in 2023. So you can find all sorts of stuff like that at youtube.com/BuckeyeScoop. So thank you all, and we will talk to you later.